Thank you so much. And I was listening to this committee in another room while I was also trying to be aware of what's happening over there. We've got a lot of stuff going on today. And I want to thank Representative LaPointe for bringing this forward. Some of you may know that I was a village trustee in Arlington Heights before I came into this chamber, and housing, affordable housing in particular, is something that we dealt with a lot in my community. And I've heard the IML say some things today about community feedback, and I have to be honest, I am troubled by some of the things that I have heard and some of the references that have been made. So how many communities have ordinances where they discuss and require affordable housing?
Thank you, Representative. Kaitlyn Mitchum with Illinois Municipal League. I do not have that number with me here today.
I am not at all surprised. I got to be honest with you.
However, I can get that number for you, and I'm happy to provide it.
Right? When you're coming to oppose a bill that's talking about affordable housing, it would probably behoove us to come armed with all of the information relative to affordable housing. Right? So just throwing that out there as a comment. So in Arlington Heights, as my tenure was ending, we had 2 developments that came before us requiring modest alterations to zoning requirements. Was the IML in any of those hearings in Arlington Heights? This would have been in the 2021, 2022 timeframe.
Thank you, Representative. I would say that we represent all municipalities, which,
that's not what I asked. I'm going to stop you because that's not what I asked. I asked if you were involved. IML, not you, Kaitlyn.
I was not involved.
Yes, not you, Kaitlyn, but was the IML involved in any of those hearings? Did they attend? Did they provide any information? And I don't know is a perfectly good answer here.
I would have to go back and check. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. They were not. And we spent hours and hours and hours hearing from constituents dead set against modest changes to our zoning to allow for multi-unit housing on a commercial piece of property that had been undeveloped for nearly 20 years and so was not participating in the tax rolls. And we heard endless feedback about this 43-unit building that was going to be built and how it was going to destroy communities and bring in crime. Hours. And I said from the dais, I am embarrassed. I am embarrassed for our community that this is how we are responding. And I'm sure it will please you to know that we did pass the zoning change and we did put in the affordable housing, and we have not seen an increase in crime. We have not seen an increase in traffic. Separately, we had another group that works with kids aging out of the foster care system, and they wanted to move their transitional housing for these young people into a different neighborhood. And we heard, again, hours and hours and hours of feedback about how this would bring crime and would tear down the community around us. And I'm sure it will please everyone to know that we also approved that zoning change, and the only crime that occurred there was a local resident who ran into a parked car with his vehicle as he was trying to take photos of these young people to prove how dangerous they were. And he subsequently had to reach out to the police chief to offer his apology and send dinner over to these youth because the community was not destroyed. So I say all of that to say, yes, local feedback is critically important, and we should be getting it. However, we do have a historic problem of getting affordable housing into communities, and it's usually under the guise of, we do not want to see change. This is going to destroy our communities. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, being both a resident and a local official and a state representative, it does not destroy communities. And it's actually what we should be seeing. It's what we should be demanding of our communities, and we should be making it very clear. So I was proud when I was on the board that in Arlington Heights, we were one of approximately 7 communities across the state of Illinois to pass an affordable housing ordinance. requiring developers to provide a certain amount of affordable housing and making sure that that was reasonable depending on where they were in the community. I would love to see the IML working with people to try and do this better instead of consistently opposing all efforts to increase housing in our state when we know that that is what we need. So I think that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask Ms. Kaitlyn Mitchum, in terms of, we heard a lot about some of the opposition you have in a broad way, in very broad terms, and we heard also from my colleague here about some of the history of opposition to affordable. What my question to you is, given that this is based on mission-based religious organizations and their ability to develop land for affordable housing, what have you done to work with the sponsor and to find some common ground, given that this is not a by right position across the board, California style? We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about religious organizations and institutions. So what have you as an organization done to find common ground?
Thank you, Chair. Kaitlyn Mitchum with Illinois Municipal League. I will say that we did have a conversation yesterday with, I called the sponsor, I spoke with the sponsor staff, and we had a thorough conversation regarding housing and the removal of a municipality's authority to make some of these decisions, and there was not anything further than we will continue these conversations, and so that's how that conversation went. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This bill was filed quite a while ago, and I would hope that your organization would, in good faith, continue these conversations and engages conversations about how we can move this piece of the overall conversation. I know there's a larger conversation, but this piece here, I feel like there should be a lot of common ground for us to have good conversations and fruitful conversations. Thank you.
You have one more question? Please, go right ahead.
So I just want to understand that. So the IML reached out via telephone to the sponsor yesterday. Do you know when the bill was filed?
Hi, Kaitlyn Mitchum with the Illinois Municipal League. I will say that there has been a House bill filed and a Senate bill filed, and we send letters every Friday to, and I'm sure all of you are very familiar with these letters, that
I am going to let you finish, but that is not the answer to my question.
Okay, sorry.
Do you know when the bill was filed?
I do not have when the bill was filed in front of me, no.
And I have received over the years a number of position letters from the IML. They usually are just a boilerplate letter, and somewhere in there, in either red bold or green bold, they say that they support legislation or they oppose legislation. There's also nothing that explains why they do either of those things specific to the bill that they are sending the letter on, right? So as a legislator, you file a bill and then the IML sends you a letter and it either says we oppose or we support with nothing else. And then they don't call, they don't send a follow-up. And so once again, I'm just troubled that this was filed at the very least earlier this year, if not in some form the year before, and the IML did not reach out until yesterday to have a substantive conversation about the contents of the bill. And yet you're sitting here before us today in opposition to the bill, right? And so for me, I find that just disturbing, I think is a word that I might use to describe it. And I know you haven't been with the IML for very long, but the IML has much experience with me, both as a member when I was on the board and in this committee over the years. So I am surprised, knowing that I am still on this committee, knowing how firm my questions are always going to be, particularly where the IML is in opposition to a bill. I am surprised that they did not better prepare you to come in and say, we should take a different approach on this one. So I just want you to take that back to the folks that you work with at the IML. I know you're new there, but they are not new to this committee. They are not new to how this process works. So this is deeply troubling to me, and I hope that in the future you can do better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I did want to just have a really quick final words on the bill because Representative LaPointe had to step out. And I just want to make sure that we know that the intention of the bill is to allow the religious organizations to utilize land to build affordable housing. And the reason that we have the bill, and the reason that we want to move forward with conversations on the bill is because there have been instances, which you heard, which took 2, 5, 10 years plus. We won't go back into it, but we have heard of situations where housing has not been built, where housing has been delayed, and we cannot afford to delay housing because housing, I believe, is a human right. And so I thank our partners here for their participation. And with that, that's wrap it up. Thank you.